A quick note before we begin. While Kelsey and Amanda enjoy debating for your entertainment, we want our listeners to know that Lit Vibes Only is an inclusive community that honors all tastes and respects all readers. Enjoy this episode. Welcome to Lit Vibes Only, where we lit the shit out of books we love and hate. I'm Amanda.
And I'm Kelsey. Welcome back to another lively Monday conversation all about books. We have a good episode for you today. But before we get into it, here are our socials again so that you can come rate, review, and comment, like all the things, send
Engage,
to people
interact.
so that we get more of an audience build up, you know? That is super helpful for podcasts. So please and thank you. So find us on Instagram at litvibesonly_podcast. And then on TikTok and YouTube at litvibesonly podcast without the underscore. You can also email us if you want at litvibesonlypodcast@gmail.com. But we don't really get emails.
I don't think anyone's emailed us so far, which makes sense.
There was like one ARC email, but I feel like it was.
Oh, you did mention that.
I feel like it was just spam. So I don't know.
Or a scam.
Or a scam.
But yes, come chat with us, especially after these Lit It or Quit It episodes. Like, we really do want to hear what you think. And I have a sneaking suspicion.
Yes.
Kelsey and I are going to be on very different sides for this novel. So yeah, let us know whose side you're on and what you think.
Yes, please do.
I feel like this book will be pretty divisive, especially because it's popular for people. A lot of people like it.
We'll see.
We shall see. But before we get to that, it's January. It's the third week of January. And this is the month. This is the time of year where folks are looking ahead to a new year, making resolutions, making plans. Are you a resolution maker, Kelsey?
I have been deeply in the past. Like I would kind of going back like almost 10 years.
Okay.
I was really into like self-development and like self-help, and I had like a personal coach and everything. And those things really supported me out of a really terrible situation. And I was really leaning into that life and that world until a point. And so during that time, I was like going over like reviewing my year and then looking forward to my next year, making goals, doing like the whole like SMART goal type deal where you're like also planning. You're like, okay, let's say I want to read 50 books, which is I said that in our wrap up episode, which is true. But then I would be like, okay, so how many books do I need to read every month, and kind of backwards plan that way. And so I still do that, I think, with some things like books, and then also like with finances and stuff, like how much do I want to have saved or like invested, because you have to backwards plan for that. I feel like it's just a non-negotiable almost. But then the other things, like I make intentions for the year, and yeah, that's how I do it. So yes, some formal, some not as formal, but definitely like to start the year in a good way.
Yeah, I find goals and resolutions anxiety inducing because I'm such a perfectionist and I'm so hard on myself. And so I feel like setting those things just adds an extra layer of like, oh my gosh, am I doing this thing? Have I reached that goal? Am I doing it well? Like that just permeates the year. And so for me, I just kind of let things crop up organically. So for example, last February, I started this workout program with this website individual called Grow with Joe. And
I've heard of that.
Yeah, I shout out to Grow with Joe. I love her workouts.
Yeah.
It will be in February. It will be a year since I started doing them, and they're amazing. And it's just something that I found organically, started to do, really enjoyed it, and then I just stuck with it. It wasn't like, I want to do this program, I'm going to do it for a whole year and see.
Yeah.
And so for me, like letting things just kind of happen naturally works a bit better for me. I mean, I think to your point, there are some things it's good to at least have a general sense of where you're going, especially with, like finances, with book goals. I actually find them super stressful This was my first year. Last year was my first year setting one.
Yeah.
I didn't set it until halfway through the year. And I only
Hmm.
did it honestly because I wanted to see how many books I was reading on Goodreads because it won't tally them up for you unless you have a reading goal set.
Oh, really? Okay, I didn't know
Yeah.
that.
So that's the only reason I said it. And
Mm.
and then I changed my reading. It changed how I felt about reading in terms of like there was always this like overarching pressure like, are you reading enough books? Are you going to hit the goal? Do you need to read more this month? And I didn't like that because
Yeah, yeah.
I want to enjoy it.
Mm-hmm.
So I did set a goal like you did for next year.
Yeah.
So if you listen to our wrap up episode, it's 50 as well. But I
But you feel
deliberately set it at,
conflicted.
well, I do. And I want to have like a
Yeah.
conversation with more people about book goals.
Yeah.
But I set it at 50 because I did 55 this year. And so like, okay, I know I
Mm-hmm.
can do it. It wasn't too bad. I feel like if I just kind of coast, I'll easily hit it. And that way I don't feel
Mm-hmm.
stressed. Like it's a goal I know I can hit without
Yeah.
overexerting myself. But if I had said, oh,
Mm-hmm.
like I did 55, let me set it for 65 next year, I would have been, does that make sense? I don't.
Yeah, no, that totally makes sense. Yes.
Yeah. Yeah.
I also, because I think our ADHD shows up very differently in
Hmm.
one another, and other than like the distractible
Hmm.
nature, where I do enjoy that goal setting
Hmm.
overachiever like aspect, and it helps me also stay motivated in ways.
Mm.
But what I have strayed away from is like doing self-help goals, like,
Hmm.
oh
Yeah.
my God, I have to like be journaling every day and
Yeah.
meditating every day
Hmm.
because that just adds stress when I'm just trying to relax,
Yeah.
you know?
Yeah.
And so I don't necessarily make goals in that way. I
Yeah. Same.
think I want to really understand them in more of like a general sense of like, oh, how is my body feeling and
Hmm.
how
Yep.
am I feeling overall
Yeah.
with those types of goals?
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
yeah.
No, I had talked about that with my therapist too, where
Mm-hmm.
I'm a should person. Like I should be doing this. I should be
Oh,
working out. I
uh-huh. Yeah,
should be.
yeah.
And she's like, in that moment, like what would serve you well? Like, do you want to? Would you enjoy journaling in that moment? Like, is that what your
Mm-hmm.
body needs or what your mind needs instead of feeling like I'm just gonna push through and do this thing because like I made this goal or because
Yeah.
whatever. And it's
Mm-hmm.
that shift in thinking has been incredibly helpful for me. And again,
That's
it's just
good.
based on like my
Yeah.
personality and the way I'm wired. I know other people find that motivation really helpful.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas I'm just like, I'm already intensely internally motivated. So
Yeah.
I don't need as much external motivation to get me going. But yeah. So instead of resolutions, because it sounds like you've got
Uh-huh.
just like a couple basic ones, do you have any things that you're anticipating in the new year? Like things you're like, I'm really hoping to do this, or I'm planning to do this, or I have this thing. Go
Well,
ahead.
one of the things that comes to mind is just so I work with a personal like fitness coach. And
Hmm.
so her and I go back and forth a lot around like what is it I'm looking forward to. And I have had to really work to deconstruct like around body image and like
Hmm.
wanting to achieve like a certain like physique and goal
Hmm.
or whatever.
Hmm.
But in the time of my life right now where I'm at, I really am wanting like ease
Hmm.
and rest while continuing to strengthen my body. And
Hmm.
so really my overall goal is just like increasing like muscle mass, which just
Hmm.
like it's not necessarily like a specific calorie or a specific
Hmm.
like workout. It's really just
Hmm.
when I'm in the gym, I push
Hmm.
myself to do more than I was last week, right? Like
Hmm.
just that little bit more and that supports muscle growth and then
Hmm.
eating a certain amount of protein rather than like
Hmm.
focusing on all these other things like is it
Hmm.
healthy enough? Is it da da
Hmm.
da? How many calories is this? It's
Hmm.
really more about like, oh, okay, I'm going to increase protein and increase like
Yeah.
weights to strengthen my body. So that's
Yeah.
like an overall focus I
Hmm.
have.
Yeah, I really like that. I was actually just down in LA this past week visiting
Mm-hmm.
family, and both my siblings there, are like healthy and work out and all that stuff. And I know for
Mm-hmm.
me personally, I always have struggled to consume more protein. Like that's always where I'm lacking.
Sure. Yeah.
And so that I guess I don't know that it's a New Year's resolution, but it is something that I'm like, okay, this is something I want to focus
Mm-hmm.
on is incorporating
Yeah.
more protein into my diet. I've never been a calorie counter. I've never done diets or those kinds of things. They just don't work
Yeah.
well for me and can't stick to them. And I think I
Mm-hmm.
naturally eat pretty healthy just because we were also raised really healthy. So those like healthy eating habits are just kind of ingrained. But I definitely, yeah, you mentioned the protein, like, oh yeah, that is something I'm definitely working on too. And I think just like my thing has been if I find workouts that I enjoy, then I want to do them. Like I love Grow with Joe because there's such a wide variety, like all the types of
Yeah.
workouts, hit, Tabata, weightlifting, cardio, all the things.
Uh-huh.
And so there's such a variety. It's like easy to fit into my schedule. I can do it at home, so I don't have to go to the gym. And it's also why
Mm.
I did that salsa class I mentioned previously on the podcast. And I'm gonna continue with that in the new year. So I'm excited to keep
Fun.
taking dance classes.
Mm.
One of the things I'm hoping to do in the new year is go to Puerto Rico. Like it's something that's been on my list for a
Mm-hmm.
while. So maybe for
Yeah.
spring break, we'll see. I'll keep you guys posted. But I think that would just be like a fun little trip to do. And it's on my
Puerto Rico would be
list.
so
So
fun.
I know.
Sadio and I are going to Mexico
Oh,
City
that's
in
right.
February.
I know.
Yeah,
It's
that'll
gonna be so
probably be our
fun.
big trip for the year. One of my friends is getting married though, and in the fall sometime probably.
Okay.
And they're gonna have a wedding in India, which I really
Oh, I
would
know which friend
love
this
to
is.
go
Yes.
to.
Yeah. That's
Oh
so
my God.
cool.
So hopeful for that. We
Yeah.
also are embarking on a road trip to Alaska
Oh,
to Juneau
wow. Okay.
in July. So Cesario's stepdad is going to join us for that because he's quite
Okay.
adventurous. And we just want to
Okay.
do a drive up there, but then also do like hiking and stuff
Yeah.
and
June is
check out
beautiful.
everything.
Yeah. Yay.
So,
Oh, I love a
um,
good road trip. Oh my gosh. And you can find a good podcast to listen to on the way up there.
there you go.
Oh my gosh. All right. Well, let us head into the meat of the matter, which is this book that I had Kelsey read. So I had Kelsey read The Inmate by Freda McFadden.
Yes, you did.
And yeah, there are a couple of reasons why I chose it. One, I think Freda McFadden is a pretty well-known, well-established author in the
Totally.
thriller
Mm-hmm.
world. And I think
Mm-hmm.
it's an author that a lot of people are going to be familiar with, or at least maybe have read one of her books. So I chose it for that reason. I particularly chose this book instead of one of her other more popular books like The Housemaid because I personally found it super twisty. I thought I knew what was going on and then I didn't know. And then I thought again I knew what was going
Oh.
on. And then the ending just totally like knocked my socks off. And it was one of those books where I just like kind of closed the cover and I was like, what just happened? And I love that feeling so much. It was so good. And yeah, I wanted
Oh.
to introduce Kelsey to one of my favorite thriller writers. I've read, I think, four of
Mm-hmm.
her books so far. I have like three more on my TBR. And so I'm curious to see what Kelsey thinks about an author that I really like and a book that I really love. So this is why I chose it. And I'm so
Some
curious to hear Kelsey's
Yeah.
thoughts.
Something we learned though, right before we started recording, is that she's actually a freaking
Yeah,
doctor,
she's
like a
a
practicing
practicing
doctor.
physician, and
What?
she specializes in brain injury, which I think is so cool, and I feel like definitely
So
informs her writing.
interesting.
Yeah, I'm sure she's seen some kind of wild
Mm-hmm.
cases as a doctor that's made her think like, "Ooh, how could I turn this into a novel?"
I don't think this one particularly. Maybe. I don't know. Maybe she had
Uh,
a
I mean, there's the medical aspect in that the main character's a nurse.
sure.
But yeah, it doesn't really have anything to do with brain injury or
Yeah.
things like of that nature. But yeah. Okay, so before we get to the summary, short response, Kelsey, was this a lit it or quit it for you?
It was acquitted.
Dang it.
I
Ugh.
was like, what do I need to, what do I
That's
was
it.
like, is
It's
it
a
a
short
mid
answer.
quit it? I was like, no, it's pretty much a quit it.
It's a solid quit it. Okay, I'll take it. It's fine. It's totally fine. I'm not devastated over here or anything. Okay,
uh,
so now that I'm putting my shattered heart back together, why don't you go
yes.
ahead and summarize the plot of this book for us?
All right. Okay. So I first want to introduce the different characters. Okay.
Okay.
So first we have Brooke, who's the main character and the narrator. Okay. We
Mm-hmm.
get her point of view throughout the whole thing. And then she has a 10-year-old named Josh. Is that
Mm-hmm.
right?
Mm-hmm. Yep.
And then there's a character named Shane,
Mm-hmm.
who is her ex-boyfriend, you find out.
Mm-hmm.
And then you have a character named Tim. So those are the main characters. Oh, and Margie. And
Okay.
I'll get into
And
the
also Tim
plot
is her
twist
like
after.
her bestie, her like childhood
Yeah,
bestie.
so Tim is her childhood bestie who
Mm-hmm.
always like loved her, okay?
Mm-hmm.
And so we find that out a little later. But so coming to the very beginning, Brooke is down on her luck and she is just scraping by at life. And her parents die in this horrible car crash.
Mm-hmm.
And so her parents have a house in the small town where she grew up, but she left 10 years ago because of a tragic incident. And she ends up moving back home to the house that her parents owned and left her with her son, Josh. She is looking for any possible position, job she can land. She's getting turned down left and right. And the only job that shows her any interest is this nursing job at the local prison. It's like this maximum security location with all these dangerous people. She starts working there and she knows, like when she applied, she knew that Shane, her ex-boyfriend, was there. You don't understand why at first
Mm-hmm.
because you are living in two different timelines for when Brooke was a teenager and when the present is happening. And so you get little bits of information as you go along. But then she also runs into Tim, who happens to be an assistant principal at a local school. And he's doing well for himself. He has interest in Brooke still. And so they end up dating and they kind of rehash the past a little bit throughout the relationship. Tim really gets along with Josh. Josh and him form a bond, and it's like he has a dad, and Josh doesn't know who his dad is. Brooke never told him. And so she ends up getting that job as the nurse in the maximum security prison. And the only thing that's stopping her from like going full time is babysitting for her son. And so she
Mm-hmm.
finds this woman, Margie, who is able to take care of him when he gets home from school and cooks and cleans for the family. She's amazing. She just is like this angel that was sent to
Mm-hmm.
her to care and help Josh. Josh
Mm-hmm.
loves her, yada, yada. Okay, we continue on. She ends up encountering Shane at the prison
Mm-hmm.
as the nurse, having to care for him. The guard treats Shane really awful. And so
Mm-hmm.
she ends up feeling sympathetic towards Shane, even though you find out that he attacked her when she was a teenager. She had been dating Shane and then tried to kill her when she was younger. But all is forgiven, apparently. And she is very sympathetic towards him while in the prison working as a nurse. And so she continues dating Tim, and Tim and her, you know, she's like feeling like something's off, something's weird. And then she's over at Tim's house one night and goes down to his basement and finds a dead body in the basement.
Mm-hmm.
And she calls the police right away. There's kind of a scuffle, and he is imprisoned for murdering this woman that was in his basement. He goes to the prison that Shane was at. And then Shane ends up getting released because she's having these like memories and is like, oh my God, it was Tim all along, the man that she had been dating. And it wasn't Shane at all. And so then Shane gets released from prison after like a month. And then she starts dating Shane. And she just kind of goes flip flopping. And
Mm-hmm.
then they're rekindling their love from when she was a teenager. And Josh doesn't know that Shane is his dad, but Shane
Mm-hmm.
realizes that and wants to have like a part in his life. Then she has this weird gut feeling that something is off. They end up going to Shane's house, which is where the murders took place and her
Mm-hmm.
attack took place, which is why Shane was in prison. But she didn't want to go, right? But she went
Mm-hmm.
anyway.
Mm-hmm.
And when she goes, she realizes Shane is the bad guy and she's having like this anxiety. But then he ends up like coercing her into and blackmailing her into like taking Josh for a while. So Josh, the kid, and Shane go walking and for a bit, and Brooke is at the house by herself, like by the car or something. And then all of a sudden, Margie shows up and she has a gun and wants to kill Brooke. And then she
Mm-hmm.
reveals that she's actually Pamela, who is Shane's mother, and
Mm-hmm.
has this vendetta against Brooke and her family. And so she wants to kill Brooke so that she, Shane, and Josh can be a happy family. Brooke also finds out in this moment that Pamela, the grandmother, also killed her parents in this car crash, which
That's
started
right.
these events. And then there's a scuffle, and Brooke shoots Pamela,
Mm-hmm.
doesn't kill her. And then police are called, all that, or they show up somehow because, like, I think she didn't have cell service at some point. And then she goes looking for Josh and Shane.
Mm-hmm.
And Josh finds her and says Shane is dead. Apparently, a icicle hit him from above and killed him. And then a chapter later, you find out that Josh actually killed Shane and bashed him over the head many times to kill him, this
Mm-hmm.
10-year-old boy. So that is the story.
Okay, two things to clarify. So
Yes.
tell the listeners why Margie killed Brooke's parents. Like, what was her
Hmm.
motivation? Like, she wasn't just out here randomly killing people.
Margie had a vendetta against the whole family because
Mm-hmm.
she had an affair with the dad a long time ago. So she had a vendetta against him because he promised her that he
Mm-hmm.
would leave his wife for her and then
Mm-hmm.
didn't. And so she's been like stewing about this ever
Mm-hmm.
since like Brooke was young. And it was Pamela, the grandmother, who
Mm-hmm.
had been like killing the people in the house with Shane because Shane shares that vendetta. Like that wasn't really
Mm-hmm.
clear, but they were in on it together. So
But I haven't read this book in a long time. Why were they killing the other kids though? Because they were at a house party
I
and there's
think they
other.
just wanted to kill Brooke,
Oh, but it was
but then
dark
it
and they couldn't.
got out of
Yeah.
control.
Okay. Okay.
Yeah.
And then the other question to clarify for listeners is why does Josh kill Shane?
Sure. So Tim and
Mm-hmm.
Josh form a relationship before Tim supposedly kills that woman, which
Mm-hmm.
Pamela is the one that killed her and
Mm-hmm.
planted the body, which I
Mm-hmm.
didn't clarify either. So Josh kills Shane because Tim warned him about Shane. If he ever saw
Mm-hmm.
a man, Shane, he's bad news
Mm-hmm.
and you should get away from him. But
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Josh internalized it
Mm-hmm.
in a different way.
Yeah. And decided to, well, because he also is
Yeah,
like protecting his mom. Like he's basically like, make sure like this
sure.
Shane person
But
stays away from you
also,
and your
like,
mom.
thinking about who his family is that grandma and his dad, they are
Mm-hmm.
murderers.
I mean, so
Like, so,
that's the other thing too that I thought
yeah.
about at the end, which you can talk about in a second. And then lastly, just to clarify, Brooke is the one who put Shane in jail. Like it was her testimony
Yeah.
that
Mm-hmm.
caused Shane to get arrested and get sentenced. So I think that is an
Mm-hmm.
important thing to know. So there's like kind of, she is struggling with feelings of guilt and did I do the right thing? And was my memory, did I misremember what happened? So that is like a through
Mm-hmm.
line throughout the story as well. Like, can she trust herself and her memory? And then the party that took place 10 years ago when all of these murders happened, they were like out
Mm-hmm.
at Shane's house, which is like out in the countryside. I believe the power went out, right? Am I
Yeah.
yeah, the power
You're
goes
right.
out and then like chaos ensues. And then that's
Yes.
kind of the flashpoint where all of this kind of kicks off, just to
Yeah. And
clarify.
if I remember correctly, it was like three people that were murdered that
Yeah.
night.
Yeah. It's yeah,
And Brooke
Brandon.
was
Yeah.
almost murdered.
Yeah, she was strangled. Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. So yes, okay. So I already know that you don't like this book and that you're
Yes.
gonna have lots of not good things to say. But what were some things you did like about this book that
Oh
you'd love to share
God, I
with
didn't even
us?
think about it.
You're like, there's
Uh,
nothing.
what did I like
One
about it?
redeeming quality of the inmate.
Oh my God. I mean, it did have me like guessing like
Okay.
what was really going on. Like
Okay.
I didn't automatically know. The
Okay.
Josh thing wasn't a huge surprise, but like Margie and
Mm-hmm.
grandma
Mm-hmm.
whole
Mm-hmm.
thing,
Mm-hmm.
like that I wouldn't have guessed.
Oh, good. Okay.
Hmm.
So you were caught off guard by that.
Sure. Hmm.
Okay. And did you like,
Which is
but
what you
did you,
need in a mystery book.
well, but okay, so I'm curious because like, for folks who read thrillers and mysteries, we love that like
Hmm.
gotcha moment. Like, did you enjoy that? Like being like, oh, I had no idea and didn't see that coming, or were you just annoyed?
I don't know, to be honest. Like, I feel like there was a mixture of all the feelings of like, oh, okay. And like, oh, yeah, I didn't realize that. But I was like, I still hate these characters. I was like, you can kill Brooke and I wouldn't care.
Okay, so this sounds similar to None of This Is True, where you're like, I don't
A
like the
little
characters,
bit.
it sounds like.
Yes.
Okay, well, I will take that
I
little
mean, do you like
shred.
Brooke?
I think for me, because you are so caught up in likability all the time with characters. Like, do I like them or do I not? I like that for me is not a top priority at
Uh,
all, especially when it comes
yeah.
to thrillers. Like, you know that I love people behaving badly. And so I'm not necessarily
But like
looking for sympathetic
stupidly, it doesn't
characters.
have to be, they don't have to be stupid.
I guess so for me, I didn't find Brooke to be stupid. I think, again, I think she behaved in a really human way. She had something really traumatic happen to her when she was 18, which is basically a
Yes.
child. She's
Still, yes.
she's also just
Agree
lost
with
her
that.
parents, right? Like that's a huge traumatic experience. And
Sure.
so she's also grappling with that. She was a teen mom and is like raising this child on her own. She's struggling to get by like so I don't know. I think I also tend to give people a fair amount of grace because I'm just like, that's a lot. And like, we don't always behave our best or make the best choices or think the most clearly when we
Sure.
feel overwhelmed or swamped or stressed. And we
Mm-hmm.
look for comfort where we can find it. So it makes sense that she was like, oh, here's Tim. And we already had this great relationship as children. And he feels safe right now. And everything feels unstable and unsettled. Like it makes sense she would kind of rekindle those feelings. Or like even when Margie shows up, like, oh my gosh, thank goodness here's this kind woman who's going to do something good for me. Like you're not going to look a gift horse in the mouth at that point, right? You're just
But
going to be like,
then,
thank the universe that something good has happened.
yeah, I probably would have felt the same way as her about Margie, but Tim and Shane, like I don't understand
Mm-hmm.
like why she would put herself in those situations. Like the whole job thing, like maybe, but
Mm-hmm.
then feeling really sympathetic towards Shane, like
Mm-hmm.
that doesn't make any sense. This man tried to kill you 10 years ago and then you all of a sudden you just want to be okay with the fact that he tried to kill you or that you're questioning whether or not he killed you. I don't know. I just don't think
He
you would
didn't kill
I
her.
don't think that you would automatically be like, "Oh yeah, maybe he's a good person actually." Like
Well,
to the other side of the spectrum.
sure, but it wasn't an automatic thing. It was a bit of a
I
gradual
mean,
progression over like when she goes there, when she first starts the job, she's like, "Oh my gosh, scum of the earth, Shane, gross." And then it's a gradual
no,
shifting.
but she
Yeah,
sees the way the guard treats him and
yeah,
then is like, "Oh, you
yeah,
shouldn't be treating him like that."
yeah.
It's like, "What?" Oh yeah, that's the other thing that
Okay, go
happened
ahead.
is that Shane kills the guard once he gets out of the prison.
Yeah, he
You
does.
remember?
Yeah. And
It's
also, that's
crazy.
another thing you didn't mention in the summary. Hunt,
Oh.
who's the name of the guard,
Is that who it is? Yeah.
they
He
all
was
went to high school
forgettable.
together. So they
Oh, yeah,
all,
that's
right.
right.
And he was the
Mm-hmm.
kid at the party that Shane beat up. So Hunt has his own like little vendetta
He
against
was
Shane.
at the
And it's why,
party?
yeah, and it's why he mistreats Shane while he's in prison because now Hunt is in a position of power and
But
can
I thought
abuse that
Brooke was the
power
only survivor.
of the party.
And Tim,
But I don't think Hunt
it was
stayed.
only Tim. Oh, maybe.
Yeah, because it's after
Maybe
they
he
play
left.
Never Have I Ever, or while they're playing
Yeah.
it, and he beats up Hunt for saying something about his mom. I thought that's how it went. I could be
No, I thought that
misremembering.
was like a previous memory. I don't think that was
Oh,
at the
oh,
party. It
okay,
was like a
okay,
memory
okay,
like that had happened. So I'm not
okay,
sure Hunt was actually there,
okay.
but he did have
He
a
did have
memory.
a bad, yeah,
Yeah.
he had a bad interaction with Shane beating him up at some point. And so now that Shane's in
Yeah.
prison and he's the guard, he's definitely like, on a power trip. But again, like, I don't know. I feel like I'm a pretty empathetic person and just seeing someone in a position of no power being like visibly hurt by someone else, I think it would still make me feel I don't know. For me that did not rub me the wrong way. Maybe there's something wrong with me. I don't know. But I
You
was like,
just like these more than
"Oh
I
yeah."
do,
Like
I
I
think.
I do. But I think I am a really empathetic person, so that would bother me even if they were a quote unquote bad person. But again,
Yeah,
she's not sure. Like there's always been this element of uncertainty. Like was
sure.
Shane in fact the person who hurt me that night or wasn't he? And I think if
Yeah.
she was like 110% certain, I don't think she would have been so easily swayed.
Mm,
But that uncertainty like permeates the entire book, and I think is why we see her flip-flopping because she really doesn't know what happened
sure. Hmm.
and allows for her
Um,
to be, yeah.
the other thing that I didn't like about the book is that there were various plot holes that I was like,
You mention
would
this. Tell
that
me more. What are the
actually
plot
happen?
holes?
Can that actually happen? So I don't know much about the legal system, but
Okay. Okay.
how probable is it that the prison would just overlook her connection to an inmate? Like that doesn't seem likely at
Mm-hmm.
all, for
Mm-hmm.
one. But then also when she like recants her statement about Shane being the murderer, right?
Yeah.
Then he's just like out of jail. Like what? We have no evidence that he didn't kill those other people. Like that doesn't seem probable at all. And then
Yeah.
Tim is just like, "Oh, it's all Tim. Tim did it." Like that seems really improbable and unlikely. Like there's a
Yeah.
system and a process for those things.
Yeah.
So that seems
Well,
really
Tim
unlikely.
Tim didn't go to jail because of the previous murders. Tim went to jail because of the body in his basement.
But
But I do go ahead.
what are the rules around all of that, right? Because then,
Yeah.
but she is saying Tim did the other murders,
Yeah.
right? And so
But
like
he's
what
not
process does that take and like all of
I don't
that?
know that
No,
he's
I
currently
know.
being tried for oh,
But
okay.
I think that was the whole point. Like now she's like, "Oh, it was all Tim."
Yeah. But I don't
And
think
so
that's going to
yeah,
impact
he
like
was,
the legal process at all. Like I
but
think
then
he's only going to get tried for the murder in his basement.
but how can a person be
Mhm.
exonerated when
Mhm.
there's not like an actual person that did it? You know what I mean? Like you can't just, "Oh yeah, he didn't do it." But like who did those
I
murders then?
Yeah, well, you
Do you know what
can't
I
keep
mean?
someone in prison just because you're not sure who did it. Like that doesn't work
Well,
either.
I don't know.
But
What's the
well,
process?
I don't know. I know I coach mock
It's
trial, but I
not
am
this,
not
I
by
don't
any
think.
means, I'm not by any means an expert in law, but I would think, and I don't know, if someone was convicted primarily or exclusively on eyewitness testimony, right? Someone's like, I saw him do X,
Yeah,
right? And then that person was like, yeah, I was mistaken or whatever. I do think the case either would get retried or perhaps thrown out, maybe if that was the primary piece of evidence
maybe.
that put him away.
Yeah.
If it was based on other things like fingerprints or DNA evidence or whatever, that'd obviously be a different story. But based on this, it sounds like Shane was primarily charged and put away because Brooke was like, I saw him. He was the one I remember. And
Yeah.
that's why she has such guilt weighing on her because she is, in fact, the reason he was put away. So if then she's like, just kidding. I'm not sure that it would make sense that
Uh,
not necessarily that he would suddenly be free because that does seem very
right.
expeditious, but
Yeah.
it would at least, perhaps like get an appeals process going or something.
And so, yeah, at least a year in the process or something. It would take
Well,
time.
well, okay. One more thing really quickly. Cause I have listened to some true crime podcasts.
Okay, maybe you know
And
more than me.
I have listened to some cases where new evidence has come to light that has completely, exonerated or shown that the person who was incarcerated was the wrong
Uh-huh.
person, and they're out
Mm-hmm.
pretty quickly within a matter of months. So they don't keep them in there. It's not like, oh, you have to still stick
Mm-hmm.
around for another year while we
Mm-hmm.
sort this through.
Mm-hmm.
So it can be pretty speedy, but he was out in like a month, I think, in this book, or
Yes.
like a couple weeks or something.
And so the other thing that bothered me about Brooke's character,
Okay. Okay.
well, one, her choice in men, like, first of
Well,
all, and the fact that she's like, oh, like really interested in Tim. And
hmm
then as soon as Shane is out and Tim is behind bars, she's like, oh, I'm really interested in Shane. Like, she has sex with
hmm
him like the first night he's there. And
Oh, that's
then
right. Yeah, I forgot
and
about that.
then is like, I don't know about this. And
Yeah.
I'm like, what is
Yeah.
your problem,
Yeah.
Brooke? And then and then they find out it was Shane and his mom. And then she's like, oh, Tim, like she just like goes flop, flip, flop, flip, flop. And I hate that.
Okay,
It's
that is a fair
annoying.
point. She is a bit fickle when it comes to her relationships. The
Uh,
only thing I will say in Brooke's defense, which is not much of a defense, is that she did have previous relationships with both of them. So she does have I mean, one's romantic
but
with Shane and one
yeah,
is, platonic, a good friend with Tim. So
yeah,
it's not like she's just encountering these men for the first time and is suddenly like, I'm into you. She does have a history there. And so it's one
sure.
thing to rekindle something that was already there versus just fabricating something out of thin air that wasn't there to begin with. I know that's a
Right.
weak defense, but that's all I've got.
That's all we got for Brooke. Oh my gosh.
And
So remember, I
she's also a mom too. And I think part of her thing with Shane is that like maybe she really does want to be a family and give Josh a dad. So anyhow, go ahead.
yeah, maybe. I
Yeah.
don't know. She's
I'm
up to
trying.
nice. She's
Okay.
up to nice. But yeah, so those were kind of the holes. I was like, could that actually happen? I don't know. And it
Okay.
made me question those things.
Sure.
And so I think that's the thing with mystery that gets me like wrapped up. Like I
Mm-hmm.
just look at those holes or perceived
Yeah.
holes
Yeah.
and I'm like, how likely is this? Some of this stuff is like really not
Mm. Mm-hmm.
believable. Like I need to be able
Mm.
to believe that it's possible to actually like me to follow the story and be like, oh yeah, and be
Yeah.
surprised and
You
be like, oh my
know,
God.
I hear you. I hear you. But here's the thing. Truth is stranger than fiction. They definitely went through a huge like true crime podcast phase.
Uh-huh.
And you listen to some of these crimes and actions that people
They
have
sound
taken and it's the
wild.
same reaction. It's like this couldn't happen. Like how could someone do this or why would someone make these choices? And so like I guess for me because I've like seen and heard of people behaving strangely and in ways that I could never fathom in real life, seeing people behave in
Mm-hmm.
this way in fiction doesn't I'm not confused. I'm not blown away. I don't have a sense of disbelief. I'm like, oh yeah, I've seen humans in real life do some crazy shit, and this seems on par with that. So I'm not phased. I think though,
I don't
if
know.
there is a huge plot hole, if there's something that really doesn't line up, it does throw me and it does pull me out of the story and annoys
Mm-hmm.
the heck out of me. If it's like
Mm-hmm.
very much like, you know, at the very end, you clearly just pulled something out of your butt to make this all work and it's really lazy. Those endings get me. I didn't get
Yeah.
that with this book. I was like, okay,
The,
this is plausible. I
you
like
know
it.
the ending that I would have wanted for Brooke that
Okay.
would have made this book better
Okay. Tell me, tell us.
is like not even pursuing Tim at all in the end, just like keeping her space and
Mm-hmm.
getting
Mm-hmm.
to fucking therapy.
Yeah. And like
Like
leaving
I
that
could have
town too.
and leave the town, like sell the
Yeah.
house, like do whatever you
Yeah.
need to do. Get out, get the fuck out of there.
Yeah.
Save your
Yeah.
child. Like
Yeah.
get
Put him
him
in
into
therapy.
therapy. Because like hello.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I would
So
agree with that. I would
I
agree
would
with
have liked
that.
this book more if that's how it ended.
Wait, but going back really quickly, because you mentioned this during the summary, you were like, oh yeah, Josh killing Shane with the icicle or whatever. Like it didn't, you're like, oh yeah, that didn't phase me, or like I was expecting it, or what were you saying earlier?
I don't
Like
remember, but
you were just saying like it
it didn't
didn't
surprise
surprise.
me. It's
That's what you
like
said. It
the
didn't
apple
surprise
doesn't
you.
fall far from the tree, right? Like it doesn't surprise me that Josh has these tendencies of his dad. You
Mm.
know, even though he didn't grow up with his dad, but I've seen it time and time again where like even I didn't really grow up with my dad up until a certain
Mm-hmm.
point, but I still had
Mm-hmm.
like various mannerisms and like things like that. Or even like, you know, I think that those genetic files like stay with you, even if you're so that was
Mm.
believable to me, I
Mm-hmm.
guess. That
Okay.
wasn't
Okay.
unbelievable to me.
Yeah.
And he had an attachment to Tim. You could
Yeah.
see that
Yeah.
in the book.
Yeah.
And so I don't know. I was like, oh yeah, the child. That makes sense. I
Yeah.
don't know. It just wasn't like crazy, a
It
crazy
wasn't
idea to
crazy.
me.
I just didn't call it, especially after like the big
Sure.
reveal with Marge. I'm like, okay, well that was it. That was the big twist. And then
Oh.
like the additional twist of Josh was like, okay, all right, Frida, calm down. That's crazy. So I enjoyed it. It kind of makes me think of None of This Is True. We talked about this a little bit
Ew.
where it's like,
Don't bring that book
um,
into this. God, what?
because you know, and again,
The children.
I just want to clarify that I'm not justifying the adults' actions in that book, but
Yes.
I remember you were kind of saying how I don't even remember her name, but when she was a child and she's like being manipulative and all these things, like oh, like she's a child,
Uh-huh.
and I'm like, kids could do some crazy stuff, and it's not like the first time in history that we've seen kids doing things that are problematic or dangerous
Mm.
or,
Mm-hmm.
and so in this book too, I was like, oh yeah, here again, we have this idea that like kids are capable of
Oh.
evil.
Mm-hmm.
And I guess in his mind, it's not evil. He's protecting his mom, but there's still that
Mm.
capability.
Yeah, yeah.
And I always find that intriguing in books,
Oh,
like when you
see
have
that.
kids behaving badly in that way.
Yeah. The thing that got me, and none of this is true though, that I
Yeah.
didn't like wasn't that
Yeah.
she was problematic child, but that
Yeah.
things were blamed on her
Yes.
because she was
Yeah.
a problematic
Yeah,
child,
exactly.
right?
Yeah.
Like
Yeah.
that was like
Yeah.
what
I
I didn't
agree.
like about that. But children doing problematic things, yeah,
Yeah. Wait, so are
Totally.
you,
Especially if they like grew up with like, problematic parents
yeah,
or situations.
are you
That's
more of
that.
a nature supersedes nurture person or vice versa? Because like you were just saying how like, oh,
Um,
Josh, even though he didn't grow up with his dad, he
mhm,
has these innate tendencies perhaps towards violence. So
sure.
are you more like it's a nature, like nature supersedes
Well,
nurture?
before I answer that question, I will
Okay.
also
Yeah.
say he's growing up with a traumatized mom as well. So it's not just from Shane, right? Like it's
Mm-hmm.
a mixture of the two parents, right? Like he didn't grow up
Sure.
with his dad, but then also like he's experiencing his mom in this way, which probably
Mm-hmm.
isn't helpful for his development,
Sure. Yeah.
which I in this fictional story, but I'm both actually. I
Okay.
think that you can,
Yeah.
be made from your
Mm-hmm.
parents and then not have any connection to them, but then grow up in a loving home, which
Mm-hmm.
changes your trajectory or like who
Mm-hmm.
you are as a person. But there are definitely some underlying like DNA, that not necessarily you can't overcome, but that is harder to like just take out of your character. Does that make sense? Like I think it's a mash of both
Sure. Sure.
things.
Yeah.
I don't think it's one or the other or one takes more precedent over the
Okay.
other. I
Okay.
just think that depending on your upbringing like that either further validates like the DNA you got or it supports you in like growing. Does that
Encountering
make
those things,
sense? It's
perhaps.
like a tragic like thing
Sure.
that you're birthed from.
Yeah.
You know what I
Yeah.
mean?
Yeah. Sure. That makes sense. I was just
No.
curious because you mentioned that about Josh. Like, oh yeah, the whole nature versus nurture debate. Like, how does that tie into all of this?
But what about you?
I think I agree with you. I think it's obviously a mix of both. It's not one or the other. I
Mm-hmm.
do think depending on your environment, one might take precedence, right? Like one might have
Mm-hmm.
more space to like manifest or take dominance versus the other one.
Yeah.
But I don't know. I mean, I think there are perhaps particular traits that are harder to counter than others,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
right? So I think that that is an impact as well. Like we
Yeah.
all are a mix of different traits and personality elements, etc.
Mm-hmm.
And some of them are, I don't know, more deeply interwoven into who you are, and
Mm-hmm.
some less so, and
Yeah.
some, are more problematic or less problematic or not at
Mm-hmm.
all. And so I think that also factors in, and some people might have more traits that are, yeah, I don't know.
Yeah.
I don't, yeah,
I just think thinking about things like depression and anxiety,
yeah.
I think those are definitely things that
Mm-hmm.
are passed along, right?
Yeah.
And so
Yeah.
if your parents struggle with those things,
Mm-hmm.
you're going to
Mm-hmm.
experience some sort
Mm-hmm.
of like trickle
Mm-hmm.
down
Mm-hmm.
of that. Not
Mm-hmm.
necessarily in the same way or
Mm-hmm.
same like
Intensity or
intensity,
yeah, severity. Yeah.
but yeah, or severity, but
Mm-hmm.
you're likely going to
Sure.
experience that because that
Sure.
is the experience of your
Yeah.
parents. So
Or also
that's
like
at
even
least
if
what
you,
I,
yeah, but
the
also
line
too, if
that
you
I
grow up
walk.
with parents that, really struggle greatly with both of those things, it
Mm-hmm.
could also, even if for some reason like it skipped you, right, you didn't, I don't know, have those certain
Sure.
proclivities or not proclivities, that's the wrong word, I'm sorry, but yeah, have that like kind of hardwiring, you might
Mm-hmm.
experience those things, kind of, what's the word, where you experience symptoms of something even if you don't have a particular, it's like when a woman's pregnant and her
Mm.
husband's experiencing like
Oh,
what is that
yeah.
called? Oh my gosh, I might like
It's
sympathetic
on. Yeah,
or
yeah, yeah.
something like, yeah. Listeners, I hope you know what I'm trying to say. Anyhow,
You're having a Kelsey moment.
I'm having a Kelsey moment. Ah! But basically, yeah.
Sympathetic
And I wonder
pains.
if
I can't
like
remember.
even if you don't personally maybe have those markers to have struggle with depression or anxiety, but
Sure.
you grew up in a house where you're witnessing that and you're kind of in, what is, God, I really am struggling with my words today. Taking in those
I'm
things,
having
that it
fun.
does shape the way that your mannerisms, your thinking, your behavior, almost as a, yeah, it's almost like secondhand smoke, right? It's like secondhand anxiety or secondhand depression.
Sure.
Yeah. I wonder, or like, yeah, if you grew up in a house where you have like neurodiverse parents and siblings, even if you particularly aren't, if you start to develop
Mm-hmm.
behaviors just because that's the norm
Mm,
in your family. And I've had this
maybe.
conversation with friends too about it. And it's like, oh yeah, interesting.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. But
Yeah.
anyhow, we don't want to go off on like a whole like ADHD tangent
Super
rabbit
tangent.
hole. Just made me think of it. That's where my brain went. Okay. Are there any other things about this book that you wanted to bring up that just really irked you, Kelsey?
I mean, I think I
I
brought
feel
up
like you covered a lot.
yeah,
So
I think I brought up the majority of them. I don't think there's much else.
would you read another book by her if I recommended another one?
Sure. Yeah, I think so. Like, I know Freda McFadden is really popular.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
so I'm curious if there is a book that I would
Mm.
like.
Hmm.
Dang
I
it.
feel like so far the three thrillers that I've recommended, you've liked one out of the three, which isn't bad because you did
Verity.
like
Yeah.
Verity.
Yeah.
So
I
I'll take
wasn't
it.
opposed to Verity.
I'm gonna keep trying. There's so many more. So
Why is
I'll
it
keep
Colleen
trying.
Hoover I like? That's ew.
I mean, she wrote a good thriller. Like it was just bizarre and
Yeah.
wild
Was that the only thriller she wrote
that I'm
so
aware of. I
far?
don't really follow a lot of
She does
what
really
she's written,
romance, I
so
think.
I think she's mostly yeah, and like contemporary fiction.
Mm.
Okay, well, I don't even know if I need to ask you this question, considering how strongly you felt about this book, but would you recommend this book,
Uh,
Kelsey?
no.
Okay, all right,
I
well.
would not. Sorry for fans of Freda McFadden. I am sorry. This one just didn't hit.
All right, that's fair. You're entitled to your opinion. I obviously would absolutely recommend it. I mean, we kind of spoiled it for you. So if you
Yeah,
hadn't
we
read it and
totally
just
spoiled
listened to this, you
it. So
probably won't want
you already
to.
read it.
But I think if you pick up any of her books, you're going to be pleasantly surprised. I like
Or
them to
not.
varying degrees, obviously. And a lot of people have read The
Was this one your
Housemaid.
favorite?
Of all of her books, I would say, yeah, I actually liked, I know The Housemaid gets the most like traction, and I think it's probably
Yeah.
one of the most popular books that people are familiar with. But for me,
Uh-huh.
I I don't know, it just really stuck with me. It's like one of those books I just never
Okay.
forgot, kind of like with Verity. And I was like, okay, I need Kelsey to read this. So grab this
Well,
book,
there we
take it to
go.
the beach, and enjoy yourself.
Yeah.
Okay, on to one of my favorite parts of our Lit It or
I
Quit It
know. It's
episodes.
so great.
Literally the best or literally the worst.
The
I'm gonna read
worst.
5 star, some 5 star Goodreads reviews, and Kelsey's gonna read some one
One
star.
stars.
So we can, get a couple more voices in the mix
Yeah.
and entertain y'all. So do you want to start with your one
Yeah, I can start
star?
us off because how many
Okay,
do you have? You have, you
4.
said four.
Yeah.
I have four too,
Okay.
but we'll see where we get. Okay, this one is from Goodreads, 1 star review. Also, I'll say there were few 1 star reviews, but the 1 star reviews that were there were
Mm-hmm.
very like, it wasn't like a, 5 star review for a fantasy where it was like, oh my God. It is well thought out, in my opinion. So,
Okay.
from Kindle Berkey, I wanted to like this book and it had me in the first half. That's the only reason it gets a star instead of me just deleting it from my memory entirely. But damn, did it get unreasonable quick? First of all, the idea that so many people can be accused of this one crime before someone starts questioning Brooke's sanity is laughable. Not to mention, this author clearly was not taking into account the length of time it takes for quite literally anything to move in the criminal justice system.
Mm.
There's no way Brooke simply recanting her testimony gets this man out of prison 10 years after conviction. Also, some of the plot points were just insane. Margie Pamela helps her kid murder all of these people over the span of 11 years and then just casually gives it all up just because her son died when the grandson is still alive. And why even bother murdering Hunt just to open the door to make Brooke realize Shane is an issue? With the way this book went, it almost would have been better for her not to suspect anything at all and get ambushed. The POV change in the epilogue made it even worse for me. First of all, the kid sounded much younger than 10, by the way. It was written, in my opinion. But then he casually confesses to killing someone? Huh? I wanted to like this. The premise of it was promising, but it went downhill so fast I got whiplash. So someone
Okay.
agrees with me about that.
I mean, she
The
does
prison.
bring up some valid points, especially with the criminal justice system and how
Yes.
slowly it moves. And I don't remember thinking Josh sounded younger than 10, especially since I work with kids. I was like, I feel like
Yeah.
yeah, I could see a 10-year-old
That
speaking and
wasn't
thinking that way was
yeah.
not an issue. But
Josh
there
actually
is
wrote way more than a 10-year-old would.
so true. So true. But
I
yeah, I
couldn't.
think you do. There is like an element, a little element of like willing suspension of disbelief. I think sometimes with thrillers, which
Mm-hmm.
you either have to like buy into and roll with or not. And I think the same
Yeah.
goes also with fantasy. And depending on what you like, you're more willing to suspend your disbelief, right?
It's
Like I'm,
true.
yeah, like you're more willing to
Because
suspend your disbelief for fantasy and romantasy, and I'm less likely to, and vice
yes.
versa.
Yeah, yeah. And not
Yeah.
only that, like with fantasy, well, romantasy, when they say it's enemies to lovers, but it's really not. They're like in love from like first sight. And then the girl continues to be like, oh my God, he hates me. He wants to kill me. And then you're like, shut up. Like,
Oh, you
that's
mean like
not
Fourth
even
Wing?
true. Oh, I still loved
Literally.
it.
I
But
know.
yeah, I get it. I
Yeah.
get that.
Okay. My first 5-star
Five
review
star.
is from Carla Espinosa. The
Okay.
ending, my jaw was on the floor for multiple parts of this book. One of my fave Freda McFadden thrillers for sure. This
Oh.
story and the way it unfolded was so interesting to me, and it captured my attention so much that I ended up reading it in a single day. From the first chapter of this book, all you want to know is how, why, and who. Frida has a way of making you think you have the whole story figured out, and then she'll throw the wildest plot twist your way. If you're in a reading slump, this is the book you need. I actually wouldn't disagree with that. I feel like this would be a great way for me personally, to get
For
out
people
of
who
a
like
reading slump.
mystery,
Oh,
yeah,
for
I don't
sure.
agree. I don't disagree with that.
Yeah. Okay.
I could see it because it's like fast paced and like that's the other thing I
Yeah.
could say I liked about it. It's fast
Okay.
paced. Okay, so another 1 star review from Lamus. Not sure how to
Okay.
pronounce that, but that's what we have. This was just weak. A very loose plot, too many coincidences, a dumb protagonist. This whole book would have not existed if Brooke just used 2 of her brain cells. How come she comes back to the very place she left 10 years ago, not expect to meet people she knows? How did she know she'll be working in the prison facility where her ex was and not prepare herself and just blurt out stuff the second he looks at her? How do the police work in that town? Do they just keep relying on whatever Brooke tells them? They haven't thought of investigating any of the murders further. The motive is quite weak for such a killing frenzy. I can swallow an unrealistic occurrence or two, but not when every plot twist is based on ridiculous omissions and coincidences.
Okay.
Right.
All right. I mean,
I don't disagree.
yeah, again, willing suspension of disbelief. There's definitely some things you just have to let go in order for this to be an enjoyable read for you. Okay.
Yeah.
V says, wow is all I can say about this book. Never Lie was my top Frida book, but I think this one really takes the cake. Just when I thought I had it all figured out and everything seemed a little too predictable, here comes the twist and turn Mrs. Frida is always so good at. I should have known. I enjoyed reading this from start to finish. At no point did it drag for me. I also loved the last chapter from Josh's POV. Would love to read a novel based on his life growing up as an adult. A little scared he may turn into a serial killer. Would be cool to hear more from his perspective, though. Overall, 10 out of 10.
Ooh.
Yeah,
Okay.
it would be like reading a book like we talked about with Verity from like Crew's point of view, the boy, the son,
Uh-huh.
like what
Yeah.
he thinks about this whole situation and how he has processed it and like grown up.
Mm-hmm.
It would be
Wild.
interesting. Yeah, we'll do someone needs to write a fanfic.
Definitely
Okay.
a psychological thriller.
Oh, for sure.
Okay. From Ree, 1 star review off of Goodreads. I never thought it was possible for a thriller book to be corny until this. Everyone is so fucking dumb, and Brooke cannot think for herself. First of all, if she really is traumatized and reacts badly from even the small details, why doesn't seeing Shane scare the fuck out of her? And even being in the
Mhm.
town where it all happened, she's so stupid and she gives me that pick me girl vibes. Also, how the fuck is Josh a 10-year-old who showed no comprehension of anything and acts and is being treated like a 5-year-old, able to kill a grown man? That's so far fetched, it's corny. I was going to give this book a higher rating when Brooke thought Tim was on it, and I liked that idea. Then she was wrong. Like, Brooke, you only had one job. What the fuck is I lope you?
Oh,
That's
that's
right. That's
right.
right. That was a little corny. Okay, I'll
Yeah, it
give
was.
that rating that.
Wait, is that the end of it?
That's the end of it. Yes, I'm just the
That was,
last review I
yeah, because
had is
it's
just so
just for
funny.
folks who haven't read the book. Yeah, Shane and Brooke have like this inside joke that is
Mm-hmm.
like, instead of saying I love you, they say I lope you, right? Or I lope
Yes, yes.
or I lope anything, I lope tacos, whatever.
Yeah,
And
yeah,
it
yeah.
comes up a couple times in the book.
Yes.
Okay, moving on.
Oh
Next
my
5-star review, Paige from Pages of Books. Wow, 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 wow. My new fave Freda McFadden book. I could not put this book down during every free second I had. I devoured this book. I can say with certainty this was my favorite book of 2023 so far. This was such a good thriller that kept me hooked the entire time and had my jaw on the floor most of the time. I truly didn't know what to expect, and the ending had me shocked. Need a good read? Need to get out of a reading slump? Need a book you'll never want to put down? This is it. I cannot emphasize how much I recommend this thriller.
Oh, I wanted to put it down.
I think it was definitely, again, I read thrillers for entertainment purposes, almost purely
Yeah.
entertainment purposes. And I feel like I was so entertained. Like you don't think that hard about a book that you're reading just for entertainment. You just, again, you let
Uh,
it wash over you and you
maybe
just
I need
enjoy the
to
ride.
bring my fantasy brain to a murder
Yes. And I need to do that
mystery.
with, well, I feel like I did do that with like Akatar and even with Fourth Wing. I was
Fourth
like, I'm
Wing.
just going to enjoy it. It's just like, just this is pure, 100% pure entertainment. And when I do that, I do enjoy it a lot more.
Yeah. I will try that next time.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
Unless there's incredibly awful plot holes.
I
That's the
will.
only thing that takes me out, I think. And
It,
like I think Brooke being annoying was the thing that really, really irked me.
yes.
So we'll
Okay.
see.
I
We'll
will try
see.
to
We'll
find a
see.
plot hole free, non-annoying
So
protagonist
figure those
thriller.
two things out.
On it.
All
Thank
right.
you.
My last this one I'm dying at the end of this. But last review, also from Goodreads, Dorothy Moheller. Okay.
Okay.
Please, Lord, give me the strength to never listen to this type of book again. Just plain embarrassing. Awful. Here's an example of why I feel this way. As our heroine is down in the basement of the man she has been warned numerous times is dangerous and could be a killer, she finds the two high-heeled shoed feet sticking out of a rolled tarp. Parentheses. At this point, we know that this man's ex-girlfriend has gone missing. So what does our brilliant heroine say to herself? Has Tim rolled up a mannequin? I forgot that line. See that she is so fucking stupid.
You
Oh
know, when you were
my
like,
God.
wait, is that,
Please
hold on, is
don't
that the end of it
defend
before?
her.
Is that
Yes.
the end?
That was just
Okay.
like the snippet of like, hey, here's why Brooke is dumb. I was like, yes, actually.
I mean, okay, fair. But also, again, think about how humans behave when they're in love with
Right.
someone or falling for someone. You excuse so much stuff, right? And you're much more likely to be like, oh,
Murder?
yeah.
You
Well,
excuse murder?
no, what I'm saying is like, it makes sense why her first thought would be like, oh my God, the person I'm falling in love with and who I'm currently in his house is a murderer versus, oh, like maybe he rolled up like a mannequin. Like it makes, I don't know, for me, that does make sense. Like that's such a human response. Like if you went down to your
I'm sorry,
parents'
it's
basement
wild.
and you saw feet sticking out of a rug, you're not gonna be like, oh my gosh, my parents murdered someone. You're gonna be like, oh my gosh, I wonder why there's like, yeah, a mannequin or a life-size doll or something. Your head's not going to go to the worst possible thing if it's someone you love. It's just not. That's
But
so
does
human.
she love Tim? Does she?
I think I mean, they're dating and they're official, and she clearly has feelings for him, and he's her
He's
besties. Like since childhood, there's a lot of like shared experience and life and feelings, all
She
of that
also
stuff.
loped Shane.
I know.
So
But when she was
lope Tim, lope
18 and
Shane, lope
like
Tim, lope Shane.
she is very
Annoying.
flip-floppy. Okay, my last one is very,
Okay.
very short. It is
Okay.
also written entirely in capital letters. The user's name is Mel, and then it just had a random collection of like symbols and numbers after it, so I'm not going to try and read that. Okay.
Sounds fun.
Freda McFucking Fadden, and then like 8 exclamation points. What was that? My head hurts. And then just random letters that are just gibberish. Blah, blah, blah. And then I love you. And then banger first read for 2024. And that's it.
Wow.
They were that enthusiastic
I'm
about this book.
surprised they didn't say I lope you.
You know, that would have been so just like on brand for this book. They missed a golden opportunity with
Okay.
that.
So you mentioned, and one of your reviews mentioned one of the other books, Silent Read. What is it called? Silent Night by
Never
Frida.
lie. Never lie.
Isn't there a silent one that she read or she wrote too?
She didn't write The Silent Patient. That's someone else.
Oh,
I can
really?
look.
Okay.
Yeah, The
But
Silent Patient is also good, but that's a
oh,
different
okay.
author.
Didn't Freda McFadden also write The Teacher or something like that?
Yes.
Okay. And
I
isn't
haven't
that
read
one
it.
awful? Oh, okay.
I haven't read it, so I can't say.
Okay. I
And
hear
as a
it's
teacher, I
gross.
don't know how I'd feel about it.
I
So
can't. I
it,
can't.
it's not on my TBR. So
The book that I just finished, I recommended it during LGBTQ
oh, A
Heritage
Dash of
Month.
Salt and Pepper.
Yes, yes.
And
And
are you
there's
taking
like
back your recommendation?
I wouldn't take it back. It's more
Okay.
wholesome than like the
Okay.
romances that I read or the
Okay.
romantasy that I read. But it's an age gap and I didn't know that and I would not have been
Oh,
like, "Oh, I'm not into that." But
how?
like it was like 13, 14 years, but like
Oh,
they're adults, but like
but still, it's okay.
still,
That's big.
yeah. It is. It doesn't show up in like a power way or anything, but
Mm-hmm.
I was like, I just typically don't like age gaps.
Mm-hmm.
No, but it was like a wholesome read. Yeah, I don't take it back. It's not one of my favorite reads.
Okay.
Yeah.
Wait, why did you bring it up just now? Was there something that we were talking about that made you think of it, or you were just
The age gap thing, because the teacher thing, right? They
oh
have like
talking
some
about the
sort of
teacher?
age gap there. That's what sparked my
Oh, I see. Okay. I was like, we
thing.
have to follow
But
this
normally,
like
like, but definitely, I like forbidden love is not like off limits, but like when it's something like that, because the
mm-hmm.
teacher, I'm assuming it's like a student to teacher, even if it's like adult student teacher, like I don't, no, thank you. I don't
Yeah,
like that
I
kind of
don't even
forbidden
know what
love
the yeah, it looks like
premises.
there was a that looks like it's a scandal involving a student teacher affair.
Yeah, gross.
Yeah, that I think that's why I haven't
Yeah.
clicked on it and added it to my
I just have
TBR.
no interest.
Yeah. Although I
Especially
guess
as educators, it's like, ew,
yeah, it's kind of
God.
like when we were talking about when you did the romantasy tropes episode and you were talking about like the coach
Right.
like
Oh,
student
yeah,
or
no.
whatever. I'm like,
I also don't
oh,
like
that's
that.
so
Yeah.
yeah, that's so disturbing. I can't. I just wouldn't be able to enjoy it. Like it wouldn't
Yeah.
be like, oh, let me curl up with this book.
No.
Like, no, thank you.
And the other thing too, thinking about coaches, like I also don't like sports romances. I asked people
Mm,
for recommendations and I might read one of those at some point, but
mm-hmm,
like
mm-hmm.
typically I'm not into that.
Mm,
And then also if it's like a coach student thing, gross.
yeah. Yeah,
But
I don't read a lot of
I can't get down.
sports-based books. I did
Mm-mm.
read, what is it? Carrie Soto is Back, which I did really enjoy. And I know it like that was a really like widely read, fairly well received book. And then I read one years ago that had to do with the world of gymnastics, and it was so like
Oh,
backstabby,
interesting.
cutthroat thriller. It was really good.
Ooh.
But other than that, I don't read a lot of
Yeah.
sports-based things. It's just not really my vibe.
Mm.
Okay. Well,
Another tangent.
what a thrilling episode and tangent. Just as a recap for folks, you can find us on Instagram at litvibesonly_podcast.
Heck
You
yeah.
can find us on YouTube and TikTok at Lit Vibes Only Podcast. So if you want to
Mm-hmm.
watch this episode, head on over to YouTube and you can do that there. Otherwise, you can comment on this episode on Spotify. You can head over to our socials and say, hey, I
Please do.
really want to hear from people who loved this book too. Also, people who didn't like it, that's fine. But I'm
Uh,
curious to see if there are
yeah,
more Team Kelsey
I'm
or Team Amanda
curious.
folks for this
I,
book.
I
Like,
think
that
there's
were
more Team Amanda in this situation
probably
because of the
because if
reviews only.
right. And also because if you don't read thrillers, you wouldn't have read this book. So you probably have no thoughts on it. And if you do read thrillers and you read this book, I think you would like it. Like this is a thriller girly
Yeah,
book. Like a thriller. If you like thrillers, I think you will enjoy this book.
enjoy. Yeah,
Yeah.
possibly.
So anyhow, thank you guys for hanging out with us for this
Yeah.
second Lit It or Quit It episode for January. And we'll see you
Oh my
next
gosh.
Monday.
Bye.